He gets overstimulated and starts nipping sometimes. Or when you stop, or he's not going to cooperate here. He's just going to get hair on me.
Laura, where were you born?
I was born in Winfield, Kansas in 1955.
Was anybody in your family artistic?
I had an aunt that did oil painting up at KU and did some pretty nice stuff, yeah. Mm-hmm. My father did cartooning. He was an engineer. He did imaginary, very strange animals in cartoons. And then my brothers and sisters, we always did a lot of craft things when we were young. Okay. A lot of Christmas ornaments and things like that. But played with crayons a lot. Mm-hmm. But not so much fine art until I got older, not so much oil painting or anything.
Where did you study? Where did you go? Do you have formal art education? Or?
I went to school there in Tulsa, half days. I only needed to go to high school and another half day to get the last year, my senior year, to get enough credits to graduate. So the other half day, 5 days a week, I went to a place called Art Students Academy and studied with a woman named Pat McGuffin. And then later I went up to New York City to study with one of her teachers, Michael Aviano.
And that was New York City, or?
New York City, yeah. I lived in Manhattan and of course went to all the museums and worked and went to school. And I was 19 then, so it was quite an adventure.
Were there a lot of other people you could study from? Was there a big choice back then when you were studying?
There probably was, but I was, this particular teacher had studied under Frank Riley, an illustrator named Frank Riley, and he taught for a long time at the Art Students League. And so I was pretty convinced that I wanted to stay with that program right then. It was very controlled. It was a good program for learning values. We mixed out our strings of grays, and everything was done in strings of values. And so I was committed at that time to that type of program. So when I went to New York, I was studying with her teacher. Riley had died by then, and Michael Aviano had taken over his classes after his death, so I knew that he was a teacher for that same program. Mm-hmm. Hey, Sky. This is my buddy, Sky.
Do you remember an event or a series of events that led you to fine art? I mean, was there anything kind of?
Well, I always was intrigued by it, and I think I always loved art, but I wouldn't say I was real good at it. Really showed a lot of talent early on, but actually, when my brother went to college at OSU, and he got an art scholarship, and he didn't really like the college art program, so he dropped out, and then he got in this art school there in Tulsa full time. And I really sort of thought my parents would think I should get a part-time job, so instead of doing that, I decided to go to art school half days and ended up, just getting hooked on it. And that's kind of the event. Not very romantic, but that's the way it worked.
About when did you feel, not necessarily age-wise, but when did you feel that your art was getting closer to your vision?
I guess I would either say that, there's been several times in different mediums where I felt I was getting close, but either that or I would just say my vision's a moving target. I don't really know. It seems like I'm always, I can't say I've ever been totally satisfied. It's just always.
Was there other mediums you worked with also?
Yeah, I worked with watercolor and then a combination of watercolor pastel, and I love both of those mediums. And I did a lot of figure drawing, a lot of charcoal.
How did you end up with oils?
Well, I've been with the oils all along. Most people move from watercolor to oil, but I went from oil to watercolor and pastel and then back to oil. Really, that was where my original training was. And when I did watercolors, I used them I used the same opaque and transparent areas like I do in my oil. So it wasn't necessarily the traditional way that watercolors are used.
Mm-hmm. Was there a lot of professional artists at the time when you were kind of, starting to become more of a full-time painter? I mean, was there a lot of other artists around, professionals that you knew
Yeah,
of?
well, enough, I mean, I grew up in Tulsa. We moved to Tulsa when I was 5. And fortunately, that was not that far away. You're talking about 2 hours away from Oklahoma City. So the Preta West shows started happening when I was in high school. And so I got the opportunity to go see those.
Wow.
And then Richard Smith showed in Bartlesville, which was like 45 minutes north of Tulsa. Mm-hmm. And eventually, after I got back from New York City, I got in that same gallery in Bartlesville, Talisman, and got to meet him and ended up getting critiques on my work for, I think it was probably 4 or 5 years.
Did you take workshops also from him?
No, he wasn't really teaching at that time. And I would just send him slides. It was old tech, I'd send him slides and he'd number them and write out a few suggestions and send them back. And then when he came up there to the gallery, I would meet him and take paintings that I had, and we'd kind of go over them.
Was that was that a big help for you when you got those critiques from him?
It was. I mean, I would say that an awful lot of it, looking back on it, to me, seemed more like moral support rather than so much do this here. I think a lot of, I studied his books and looked at, looked at the paintings a lot, but it was just such a boost to have somebody, interested in what you were doing and keeping up with it. Yeah.
How have you seen representational art change in the last 40 years?
A lot more emphasis seems like right now on plein air than there used to be. We painted outside, but we didn't necessarily call it plein air. So it just, and there weren't when I first started out, there weren't the pochade boxes, the little painting boxes you could go out. I made one out of a cigar box once, and my uncle made one, back before you could buy them so easily. So that's different, But at the same time, I would say maybe there's a little more emphasis on, I think in general, there's more people working from photographic reference than there used to be in fine art.
That's my other question, is that do you think painting from direct observation is important, and why?
Oh, absolutely. I honestly, in all honesty, I feel like a lot of the appeal of my work is that because I'm mostly a still life painter, and I think my work has that direct observation from life. I never do the still lifes from photographic reference, and I think the viewers pick up on that and relate to it better. That's just my theory. I mean, nobody would be able to, necessarily isolate that as being the reason they like it, but there's just And I think everybody I've ever known that successfully worked from photos, which I've done, but everybody that I know has worked from life a lot, so that they know those subtle differences that aren't always captured by a camera.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the camera is a good tool?
Well, of course, yeah. I mean, there's some things, action and stuff that obviously animals that can't really be done. I mean, I've painted my own pets, and even when you think they're asleep, they start moving around a lot more than you would guess. So there's certain subject matter that can't, and even the still lifes move a lot more than you'd think. Some of the flowers last a day or less, so you're moving pretty fast sometimes. But that same, on the other hand, if you have unlimited time, that can kind of make your paintings tight and stiff. So that push to go faster isn't always a bad thing.
How do you think the internet has affected fine art at all, if it did, or any ways? Or
well, we've all got more access to more influence. I don't know that I think maybe it's too soon to know how that changed the whole trajectory of art, but there's no doubt it did. No question. Yeah.
at least the business part, you think, or?
Yeah, the business part too. Yeah. I mean, I live in Taos, and people, really, a lot of collectors used to make pretty much of a pilgrimage out here every fall. And I think, now that they can go online and see them from wherever they are at, it's that a little of that dynamics changed.
What kind of advice would you give a young aspiring painter that might want to, pursue this full time, this fine art thing?
Well, my taste in painting is toward representational work and creating form and depth. And I think if you're going to go that direction, learning how to see as an artist sees is a priority. So anyone who emphasizes that, and then, you could go any direction you wanted from there, but also staying with one program until you really you need to pick a good one, but then stay with it until you've got a good basis of reference, a good point of reference for judging other programs. And then you can go, well, that's different from this one, and this might be something I want to add. But if if it's all kind of a jumble, it's hard to distinguish one thing from another.
Should they go to art school? Is it important, or just finding a mentor, you think?
Either one. I mean, if you could find a mentor, that's great. I mean, that would be ideal. Not everybody can. I mean, fortunately now there are ways to be in contact through the internet and online courses. Now you can access teachers all over the world, and that's great. I wish I'd had that when I was young. But I would also advise people just to keep their focus on getting their work better, not so much on the business, and just keep their life kind of simple, not too many distractions.
That's great. Laura, if you can go back in time, what era or what groups of artists would you like to, or one specific artist would you like to meet, and why?
Oh, that's pretty easy. Well, yeah, Chardin or Sargent. That would be it. I'd probably pick Sargent. Chardin, and that was way back before any kind of modern conveniences. So, okay. But I've always just been a huge Sargent fan. That's one of the artists who I fell in love with early on, and I've never changed that. My tastes have changed a lot over the years, but that's been a constant. So.
Why Sargent? Why over Sorolla? Let's say.
There's just sort of an X factor that I can't really identify. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of people whose work is, looks effortless and has the strong form and light, but I don't know. Beyond that, there's just something about his work that's always spoken to me.
Any one work that sticks out always? Like, oh my God! If
My favorite is the breakfast table. That's my very favorite.
Why so much?
Oh, there again. I mean, it's just a quiet, kind of solitary sort of mood to it, and it's just really simple, but what's there is so well done.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Sure.
Thanks, Skyler.